Good morning, everyone. It's about 10 a.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for coming to the 2022 CLRC Annual Conference. I'm Rebecca Kluber-Dance-Hansinger, the Continuing Education and Emerging Technologies Librarian. My pronouns are she, her. I'd like to start by taking care of some housekeeping before our day begins. All attendees are expected to follow CLRC's Code of Conduct, which will be added to the chat shortly. To summarize, please treat all CLRC staff, event attendees, and speakers with respect. Those who are not adhering to the Code of Conduct will be removed from the conference. The conference program has already been shared with all attendees, but you can also find it on the CLRC website. That link will also be added to the chat shortly. In the program, you can see our schedule for the day and links to our virtual poster sessions. These posters will be available until Saturday night, so please take a look and feel free to ask questions or comment using Google Comments. If you'd like to learn more about what CLRC has done over the past year, please check out our 2021-2022 annual report. A link will also be added to the chat. There will be 10-minute breaks in between each session, as well as an hour-long lunch break. Feel free to leave your Zoom open. We'll be keeping slides up and playing some music during those breaks. We will be utilizing the chat as well as the Q&A feature for this webinar. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat now, which I already saw some people doing earlier. We also ask that you use the Q&A feature to ask questions so they don't get lost in the chat. You can find that towards the bottom center of your screen. Live captioning is available for the conference. To toggle the subtitles on or off, click the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and choose either show subtitle or hide subtitle. Now, I'd like to introduce Mark Wildman, our Executive Director, to add some opening remarks.
Good morning, and thank you, Rebecca. And hello, everyone. I'm so happy to welcome you here today joining us. First off, I need to thank Rebecca Kluber-Dance, who was just talking to you about creating this great day of presentations and information to share. She does a fabulous job. She's the person behind the controls for today, and it's a year-long process that we create this day. And as soon as this one is over, we start planning the next one for you. So please stick around all day if you can, or just stay as long as you can for specific sessions that you're interested in. But we appreciate you spending some time with us today. I also need to thank the CLRC staff and the Board of Trustees, because this is a collaborative effort to make this day possible. And if you don't know, this day used to be just a luncheon and a business meeting with a keynote speaker. And now this has become a full day event. And that's in a response to you, our members, with your input and your feedback. So as always, CLRC is here for you, to serve you, our members, and we encourage you to reach out to us at any time. We're the people who can answer the weird questions. So as you may know, CLRC is part of the Empire State Library Network and partners together with our 8 sister councils across the state to provide services like Empire Library Delivery, the New York Heritage Collections, New York State Historic Newspapers, as well as many other projects. We receive our funding through the State Department of Library Development under the umbrella of the New York State Department of Education. So on to today's events. We're so happy we will be featuring this morning our keynote speakers, Kathryn Stam and Klo, speaking about refugee populations in the Utica area. Then following that is Stephanie Markin, who will be talking about welcoming the LGBTQ+ community into your libraries and communities. So after our lunch break today, please come back and join us for a talk on challenging patron situations with Kathleen Degansky. Any of us in public libraries or any library know that that's sometimes a daily challenge. And then at that's at 1 o'clock. And that's followed by our CLRC business meeting at 2 o'clock, which I promise we'll keep as short as possible. But please, it's informative and stick with it, because at the end, you'll find out who the Library All-Star of the Year is. And then finally, at 2:30, you're going to hear from some of the recipients of our American Rescue Plan Act grants and the wonderful projects that they've been able to implement using that funding that was provided through IMLS and the State Library Department. And then please make sure you check out, and I know Rebecca will put the link in at some point this morning, and it's on our conference page on our website, the wonderful, the great poster presentations that we have there for you. There's 3 great presentations. I found them very interesting. So they're there for you to experience. So now I will turn things over to Ryan Perry, our digital collections librarian, and he's going to introduce our keynote speakers that we are presenting today. So take it away, Ryan.
All right, thank you, Mark. So hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Perry. I'm the digital collections librarian here at CORC. And it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speakers. First of all, Kathryn Stam is an anthropology professor at SUNY Poly and a co-founder of the Midtown Utica Community Center. For over 10 years, Kathryn has diligently documented and shared the experiences of Utica's refugee population. And over the last 5 years, I've had the pleasure of working with her and SUNY Poly to make those collections available in New York Heritage Digital Collections. Kay is currently working on a project through the Consider the Source grant to document and share the experiences of refugee populations before they came to this country. So keep an eye out for those materials in next few months when it's all ready to go. And our second keynote presenter is Klo. She is the executive director of the Midtown Utica Community Center. Her family was originally from Burma, and she settled in Utica as a refugee when she was a young child. Kay brings a vital perspective, both professionally and through her personal experiences as a member of the refugee community. The work that Kathryn and Kay are doing to help our local refugee populations be seen and feel welcome has never been more important. And I'm very excited to have them share their experiences with us today. So with that, switch gears back to my window here. You guys all set to go? You want to share your screen, Kathryn? I'll let you take it away from here.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with my colleague, Klo, and we're looking forward to talking with you about some of the collaborations that we've been doing with our community and with other organizations who support us, and it's just such a thrill to be here, so thank you. We are going to start right here, and I'm going to hand it over to Kay.
All right. Thank you, Kat. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here to speak and share with you my experiences. I would like to start off by sharing this video I created for my digital narratives class. Currently, I'm an information design technology student at SUNY Poly, and this project focuses on using artifacts to tell stories. And I chose the white IOM, it stands for International Organization for Migration bag, because for many refugees, we share the experience of, treasuring this bag, especially during the resettlement process and our journey to the destination countries. So you can press play, Kat.
When I was in 4th grade, my mother thought that the apartment that we were living in caught on fire. "Don't grab your things! Leave the apartment! There's a fire!" As she yelled for us to run for the door and flee the apartment, she ran into her room to grab our IOM bag. If you're a refugee, you know exactly what the IOM bag is. Before relocating to a new country, every refugee is given a white IOM bag. IOM stands for International Organization for Migration, which is a UN agency that provides services and advice concerning migration to governments and migrants, including internally displaced persons, refugees, and migrant workers. The bag itself is a large white plastic tote bag. On the top and bottom of every bag are the letters IOM written across in big blue letters. Right in the middle is a picture of a father, child, and mother holding hands in the middle of a globe connected by many lines. During the journey to their designated countries, every refugee is given an IOM bag. It carries all the essential documents that one needs to travel safely across borders and resettle in a new country. No matter what country people end up in, every refugee can relate to the experience of how their white IOM bag was the most important thing they owned during relocation and resettlement. Many of my friends recall stories of how their IOM bag went everywhere with them. Thankfully, there was no fire that day. As a kid, I did not understand why my mother had panicked over the IOM bag, but I could tell she was clearly shaken up by the situation. Maybe that day, when my mother thought that the fire was real, she thought we would lose everything again, like she did during the Civil War in Myanmar. My family has lived in America for 18 years, and we still have our big white IOM bag. It sits tucked away in my parents' closet along with all of our essential documents. It has collected various important documents over the years, like citizenship certificates, green cards, and applications for social services. For my family and many other refugee families, the tote bag is the most important thing we own because of what it contains and what that means for our safety and livelihood. I love to hear people's resettlement stories and how their IOM bag was essential to their journeys. As long as we have the IOM bag containing all the proof that we belong somewhere, we know that we are safe. We know we belong.
Created using Powtoon.
Okay, thank you, Kath. So I wanted to share that story because I think pictures are powerful tools for storytelling because they open ways of deeply listening and learning about other human experiences. And so I want to share with you the picture on the left. I'm the little girl there in front of my mom. But so the funny story behind this picture is one day my parents randomly took all of us to a family photo shoot at this house I've never been at. It's really random and it's a really rundown looking house. Yeah, and I really didn't understand why my parents would photograph us looking dirty in a random house. Like I've never been to that house before. It's and I was really confused. And you can tell, like I was the only one who didn't get the memo. I wasn't even paying attention in this picture. And come to find out, my parents wanted to have a family picture in case the UN resettlement agency needed proof that our family was a refugee or refugees. And they thought, if we looked desperate and poor enough, they let us in. And my parents, they understood, they knew that they had to look, and act a certain way to be accepted to the US. So in a way, they're trying to control their own narratives through pictures. And it shows how they have agency. And for a person who doesn't know the background behind the story, they would assume that we were stereotypical poor refugees that needed help. And we did, like we needed help, but my parents thought that it would be good to have really strong visuals to go with the story. And so, I want to point out that the picture is never the whole story, and it takes time and investment to get deeper into the stories and genuinely understand the good, the bad, difficult, joyful experiences. And for my family, we've lived in America for 18 years. And I would say our integration experience may be easier than most people's, but still harder than some. And depending on one's disabilities, abilities, economic and educational background, social capital, and a variety of factors, integration looks differently. And I want to point out that integration is never, a straight line where A, B, C, D, E, and you're like finally at the end where you're like, okay, I made it. It's more like a curve. It's always up and down. There are situations that we're navigating every day, culturally, socially, and it's a lot more complex than just going from point A to point B and being done. And so currently right now, my brother is a nurse. I'm the executive director at the Midtown Utica Community Center, and my sister is in college and she's aspiring to be a lawyer. But our story isn't the norm. And I feel like because we came at a young age, we were able to go to school, learn the language, get integrated, get educated, and be able to go to college. But for many refugees that arrive later in life, like for example, in 10, 11, 12th grade, many may not end up going to college because they may drop out due to not being able to keep up with the English curriculum or testing requirements. So the refugee experience is varied, and this depends on a host of factors from when you arrive, the familial situation, some like domestic violence in household, mental health issues, and other traumatic experiences. And so there's a lot of factors that play into how people learn to adapt and the resources they need to adapt in a new country. And I want to point out that for me, there were mentors that guided me and my family throughout since we came to America. We had mentors that guided us, and they helped us navigate through systems and getting the resources we need to survive and thrive. But I feel like a lot of people don't have that. And because I am where I am now, I've been able to learn about the social gaps. So, I'm always working to help other refugees to address those gaps so that they can have better futures. And in turn, we all can have better futures. All right, next, Kath. And so the Midtown, I work at the Midtown Utica Community Center, and the reason why this center was needed and the reason why it was created in the first place was the original co-founders realized they had been working with refugee populations in Utica, and they realized that refugees still needed to be followed after this initial 90-day resettlement process. And there were still families that fell through the cracks, such as needing more assistance with this due to various disabilities. And then another example is, one example that I come up with a lot is when you make an appointment for a refugee family. A lot of us aren't used to keeping calendars and reminders, and then remembering when to go to this appointment. It's just not a thing, not a part of our culture. So often people don't realize that you need to follow up with the family. You need to remind them that there's a doctor's appointment coming up, and you need to make sure they have a ride to the appointment. If they have a ride to the appointment, do they have an interpreter? Do they have a ride home from the appointment? So I worked as an interpreter for many years, and I find that sometimes a lot of the clients need rides home, and that's something that the service providers never thought of. So little gaps like that can really make it a lot difficult for people to access resources that they need. And it's hard to know if you're not, learning from the population every day, if you're not really integrating into their lives and getting to know them as people. Because when you get to know people, you really get into the nitty-gritty and realize how complex it is. So MUC has really been this bridge between the refugee and Utica community. And we really work to create programs and resources and opportunities that our community find helpful. So we're always adapting and evolving, and just being nimble with the various things that arise each day. We work with so many diverse populations, so you're always navigating through different situations each day. Let's see. And then I want to point out that working with refugees means that there is a genuine investment in caring for everyone that lives in our community. And it doesn't just mean coming to our center to get photos and stories of diverse communities and then just leaving with those stories. And I want to stress the importance of reciprocity, where relationships are being built through knowledge and resource sharing. And by reciprocity, I mean our mutual dependence on each other for survival, recognizing the importance of community. And I'm really dedicated to my work because I know that there is a lot at stake. Improving the health and livelihood of the children and people in our community means that we all get to thrive in safe environments. And I bring reciprocity up because in the past year I've been here, many people do reach out to me to get access to diverse populations, provide services to refugee families. But often the problem comes up when they don't think about reciprocity. They might want access to diverse populations for stories or even research opportunities, but people don't realize that it takes a lot of time and energy to build relationships with family, recruit them, provide transportation, make sure they are followed up with, interpreting for them. So there's just like a lot of nuances. It's a time-consuming process. And and reciprocity might look like compensating for our time and labor, but it can also be through volunteerism. And so many people don't understand that I'm the only one full-time employee in my organization. So they may not understand how difficult it is to manage a small organization serving hundreds of different refugees. And so this is just one of the important points I want to bring up. And so once you get to deeply learn individual stories and connect with people, you realize that there is a lot at stake, the future and health of our children and people in our community. What's important for me is for everyone to recognize the importance of reciprocity in community building and advocacy. Next.
Okay, thank you, Kay. I'm just going to introduce myself, and then we have some slides to help show what our work is like and some of our community. I am an anthropology professor first, I guess, in a way, and Kay and I are both affiliated with SUNY Poly because she's studying there and I teach there, and then we're both at Midtown, so we have a lot of interactions with each other, and I'm just so glad that she has joined us she's our first executive director who's a member of the community. I was one of the early people involved with MUC, and part of it was because refugees were asking for space to do their activities, and part of it was because the people who were helping refugees were feeling so overwhelmed, and they thought that maybe if we had a space to work together and we brought in a bunch of volunteers that it would get easier. And the truth is it got harder, but in a really great way. So it just grew, and the need is so great that it's been really exciting to be a part of for the last 8 years. I got involved with the refugee population as an interpreter of Thai and Lao. And through that experience, I got to see how hard it is for families, even Lao families who have been in the United States for 30, 40 years, still struggling with the medical system, the health system, social services system. I thought that maybe they would have adjusted after 10 years or 15 years or something like that. But some people just continue to struggle. And part of that is the way our system is set up. So this picture here is of the Sudanese Women's English Conversation Group. It's in the kitchen at MUC. So we call our community center MUC. It's affectionately known as MUC because it's mucky work that we do. And if you're not willing to, do some dishes and give some rides and do some of the mucky work, then you probably, don't belong there in a way, which I shouldn't say that because everybody's welcome at MUC. But what I wanted to share about this picture is that we do the programs and activities that the community wants. And so this was an initiative by a Sudanese woman who had started a community center in Egypt for the people from her community, and then found that after they came here, they needed even more. And so we got some volunteers from various places. This is a student from Hamilton College who is helping with this group. And we work with all the local educational institutions. So Mohawk Valley Community College, Utica University, Hamilton College, Colgate University, the high schools, the middle schools. That's been, one of the fun things about this whole thing. I'm sharing this picture because I want to show that we celebrate each other and we show up for each other, and we think that that's really important for community building. This is a naturalization ceremony that happened at MVCC. And one question we often ask each other is like, how are we showing up for our community? What are we willing to do for our community? And at the same time, take care of ourselves in the process. So I would never suggest to anyone else that they go about this in the same way I do. I was willing to give a lot of rides. And so everybody for a while knew my little gray car because I was always driving people around to activities. And I wanted especially the young women to know that they could count on me to get a safe ride home if they needed it. But everybody can give in different ways. So one of the questions for ourselves is like, are you willing to sacrifice your time and energy without any expectation of getting anything back? And it can be awkward, it can be difficult, it can be painful because you hear people's stories, even if you're not trying to. But it's been one of the greatest honors in my life, really, to be involved in this community and become friends and family with people here. What Muck is what it means to establish a community of care that Kay was talking about. And one of the things that makes people feel welcome is when you want to listen to their story. So this is Brian Mann from North Country Public Radio. You might be familiar with his work on NPR. And he came to Muck to talk to some of the community members after the Muslim travel ban went into effect. And part of what we do every single day is learning people's stories, and if they want to find ways to share them, to share those stories. And we started out kind of taking what all the outsiders wanted to do and then finding people for those things that other people wanted. And now we do it the opposite way. It's sort of, we try to find people who want to tell stories, who want to write poetry, who want to do dance, and then find outlets for them to do it. And turning it around has meant that there's a lot more engagement and involvement, which has been really great. We've had stories. Kay and I have done keynote speeches in a variety of places, including Hamilton College and SUNY Poly. But we've also had National Geographic at our place and the New York Times, et cetera. And so we feel really good about being able to amplify their stories. This next one, Kay.
So you may have seen this billboard on the arterial highway last winter if you came through Utica. It was part of our COVID vaccine hesitancy outreach project through the Asian American Federation. And our mission was to work with the hardest to reach members of our population and try to overcome cultural and other barriers to vaccination. And projects like this one showed our community that we care about them and we care about how images are used to represent them. And when we put up this billboard on the media, we want to make sure that people in these pictures are from the local community, that it's like showcasing the diverse populations of Utica, and because we want people to feel represented. And we had put the please get vaccinated message in various languages, trying to represent the different languages that the refugee populations here speak. So in terms of images and media, it's really, I think it's important to know the social, cultural, linguistic context of the population we're targeting. And the picture on the right was the amazing team that helped us. What's the medical center? I think the medical clinic. What they call, Kath? Upstate Medical.
Upstate. I want to say Upstate. Yeah.
Yeah. So they volunteered to get our community vaccinated. So that's the team there. Let's see. And also through the pandemic, we adjusted our activities, but the needs were still there. And our main activities included vaccine clinics to hard to reach population and online tutoring. And despite the pandemic, we recognize that people still wanted to be in community with one another. So just based on a conversation with community, we did an event, a paint and sip event where we had a local artist teach students how to paint different things. And then this was in partnership with another refugee. His name is Tabo, and he's trying to start an organization called Nomadic Voices, which aims to showcase diverse refugee voices and talents in our local community. And so one of the ways that MUC has really worked with our community is listening to what projects and ideas they have for their communities and working with them to make that happen. So this is just one example of it. And I'm finding that our community has really creative ideas on outreach, on events, and a lot of our work is directed by that.
I also wanted to mention that this is Kay's sister, Dae,
Oh yeah.
in this picture. You might recognize the resemblance. Okay.
We have a community of several thousand people who participate in programs, attend events, and volunteer to help each other navigate through their new homes and new lives. And our community comes from all over the world. Many of our friends and neighbors came from war-torn countries and refugee camps. Others of us have lived in this area for a long time and have found a friendly, welcoming place at MUC. And it feels really good to be a part of this effort to help each other thrive. And this event here was in partnership with Nomadic Voices. One of the local college students, he wanted to do, Tabo, he wanted to do an art workshop where he can share poetry around the refugee experience, particularly Korean refugee experiences locally with other people. And it was a great turnout. And there were, college students who in Hamilton College who attended, and local high schoolers and volunteers. MUC has really been a place where connections are being made across, different backgrounds and different just diverse experiences.
So along with poetry, music and culture are a wonderful way to connect, and we provide space for performers to rehearse. We organize events, we provide transportation. This picture was taken at SUNY Poly, and it's 4 cousins who come from the Bhutanese Nepali refugee community. They lived in, or they were born in Nepal, and their families lived there for 18 years before they were allowed to move to the United States. So their lives really changed so considerably, and it was exciting for us to be part of how they learned to share their stories through dance. We also had an exhibit. We've had several exhibits that have featured the artwork and the portraits of our community. And as an anthropology professor, I'm absolutely thrilled with that. I try to think of reciprocity in really broad terms, and I think about, when we approach people and say, would you like to be a part of this project, what that means. Many of the cultures that we work with are not really interested in transactions or a transactional relationship as they are in a personal, emotional relationship. And once you've been included in their group or family, a lot of times the refugees are willing to do whatever it is that you invite them to do. And so it's more about the trust that you have in that person than it is the photographs or the research or the other projects. They just say, well, if you need help, I'm of course always here to help you because you've always been here to help me. And that's what makes things very deep and complicated and time consuming. And I think that's hard for outside organizations to understand what we're doing with that. So I wanted to share a little bit about how my photo collection got started. I have a collection of 45,000 images of refugees in Utica, and they were collected in the last 10 years or so. A lot of them were taken by refugees themselves, so you can learn so much about the lives of our new neighbors through the pictures. So at first, all I did was when I found a picture that I liked, I would write to the person and say, okay to share. And then if I got it okay to share, then I would put it on my Refugees Starting Over Facebook page. And then eventually people started sending me images, and then they gave me their thumb drives, and they gave me permission to take and use any of the pictures any way that I want to, which is fantastic because I think it's such a good way to learn. And we were looking at the stereotypes before and what Kay's family looked like when they were in that Thai village home, and then what people's lives look like here. And there are a lot of unexpected things about it, and they're so full of joy and richness and celebration. That's part of what's so wonderful about the freedom that people have. So I started to do some publications to try to share those pictures, and I was so happy to learn about this opportunity to put up a selection of 1,700 images as part of the New York Heritage Digital Collections. It was really a dream come true for me because it just was a way that I could get people's stories out there. So I have another picture to share with you. Some of them are very surprising. This is Kay's brother, Han, otherwise known as Honeymoon. You can guess why parents would name their child Honeymoon. I don't think many former refugees have had this experience of jumping out of a plane just for fun. So these pictures are just full of surprises, and the collection of images that I have is lots of people taking formal portraits like this one, and then also informal pictures inside their homes where you can see every kind of social problem you can imagine, but also you can see beauty and talent. And the quality of newer cell phones makes it so it's hard to tell when something's a professional photo and just like something that they did in the living room. This is a Burmese monk, and he's with Marilyn Monroe. It was taken in Las Vegas, of course. I thought you'd appreciate that. Some of the photos don't actually say too much about refugee lives, but they represent joy. And this is a picture I go back to whenever I have a hard day. The collection is just full of joyful pictures of people having fun and living their free lives here in Central New York. Some of the pictures come without metadata or stories attached to them. This one is a family being processed into a refugee camp, and family members are numbered for convenience. It was taken in Thailand. At the time of intake, many refugees were just given a January 1st birthday. And my expectation or my understanding was that that's because they didn't know when their real birthday was, but that's not actually true. For most of them, they know when their real birthday is, and they were just processed through like sheep in a way, and given that birthday because it was the most convenient way to process them. And so one of my efforts is to try to erase some of that dehumanizing process and make people aware that that's what happened to people, and that's part of their trauma. A lot of times people's names were cut into pieces. So imagine being named Melissa, and then when you have to have a new name, it would be Meh, and then Lit is your middle name, and then Sa is your last name, because our system is not flexible and can't handle that kind of thing. We know a family who has 2 sons who are both named George Washington. So actually they have a lot of sons, but only 2 of them are named George Washington. So for images like this one, we have almost no information, and we've used community tagging approach to try to fill in some of the metadata. And we're still working to refine our methods. They are very flawed. I can tell you about that in another time. But I think there's so much promise in it. And I think it's so important to collect people's history when some of these photos, this is the only version of it that's available. And so we're making that more widely spread. So I don't have too many more in here. I know the time is ticking along. So this is my collection on Flickr, and I want to talk a little bit about permission. I keep them private because there are just a couple of people and a couple of cultures who don't want their photos shared, and that's because they're afraid that people in their home country might see it and it could be dangerous to their families. And so I'm very, very careful about what I share. I also thought you might find it interesting that we don't have a permission form, because paperwork and signatures has been weaponized against refugees. And so if I need it for a grant or if I need it for a research project, I will get the signatures that we need. But it requires a lot of explaining, because when people sign things, sometimes they had to sign over their freedom. Sometimes they had to sign over their rights. In the case of Bhutan, they had to sign over their land. They had to have pictures taken where they're smiling to show that they're volunteering to give up their land and leave the country because of their ethnicity. And so that's one of the ways where a little bit of flexibility is good. If there are other ways that we can get their permission, that can be really helpful, because the last thing we want to do is re-traumatize people over, if they, especially if they're illiterate, they can't understand what it is we're trying to get them to sign. That's a, it's a trust issue. So here's one of my students. His name is Glorious. He became friends with me, and at a certain time he said, "Sister, please stop asking if you can use my photo. It's yours now." So there's different cultural ideas about what it belongs to us. And when I first met Glorious, he had just won first prize in a singing contest. So he's a very famous Karen singer in the United States now. Okay, do you mind doing this next slide?
And so, when you have time, please take a look at our photos of some of our newest New Yorkers on the New York Heritage Digital Collection. See what surprises you. What can you tell from the images? How much do you know about the group you want to work with and the history of their struggle? What do you want to offer when it's the best thing to offer is yourself?
One last thing we skipped over a little bit quickly was the K through 12 project, Consider the Source. And so last year we collected a set of photos as part of Consider the Source. We really enjoyed working with Ryan Perry and Jordan Jace to choose the images and find out as much information as we can about the image. And the larger mission is always to find ways to help refugees have a softer landing in central New York. So we think of them first. And by collecting their photos, we're showing that we care about them. We're careful about how we use them. And as much as possible, we want to use the photos to break down stereotypes. And my final thought here is so many organizations have included the refugee community in the planning and implementation of activities. And the Munson Williams Proctor Arts Institute is a really good example of how this can work beautifully. They contacted us. We were part of the planning of this exhibit and many exhibits at the Munson. They contact us at the beginning before it's all set, ask if we're interested, ask what kind of input we have, and then they trust us with the details. So they give us the resources we need in order to do the complicated job of visiting people's homes, asking if they have clothing that they're willing to donate, lend us for the purpose of the exhibit, explain it, and also to trust us with borrowing their things and inviting them to the big event, all those kinds of things. And we really appreciate it when we're involved from the whole way, and that when the organization trusts us, the people who are working with refugees every day, to know what it is that we need in order to make it happen. So it's hard work. It takes a lot of time and effort, but we don't take it lightly. And we want to share one final slide, which is of a Karen family. And I think that this was taken, it looks like Glimmerglass State Park to me, but I always have to, reach out and ask the people in the pictures, first, can I use your picture? Second, where was it taken? When was it taken? But wherever and whenever and by whom this was taken, I'm so thrilled with the joy in the faces of these children. And this is the reason why we do what we do. Okay, did you have any other final thoughts?
No, thank you so much for listening to our presentation. Please feel free to ask questions. And I think we have one question so far. Should we just go ahead and answer it?
Sounds good.
Yes. Yes, so okay. And one of the questions is how much space does MUG have? How are they partnering with area libraries? So MUG is what the building is a church, a dance hall. We have an office, a big office space upstairs, and the building's really old. So right now our current goal is to get it renovated so that the building becomes more accessible, and the spaces, we have more space to do more activities. Since things kind of opened up after the pandemic, we're seeing that there is an increased need in the spaces that our community use. And so we have a lot of space, but because of the growing programs, we're finding that renovation is needed. And so we're hoping to get that done as soon as possible. And how are you partnering with area libraries? This past year, for this fall, we are partnering with a local library to do story time. So we invited the Utica Public Library to come read stories to students who attend our after school programming. Many of the kids, their parents, English isn't their first language, so they're unable to help their kids with homework. So allow them to come to MUG for after school homework help, and just like to share resources. We already knew that the library was doing story time, and they're really good at that. So instead of replicating it, we invite them to come get to know the students and the refugee population. And our partner organizations are always so happy to meet the kids, and yeah.
I have a comment and then a kind of a flip on that last question. First of all, I think thank you so much for your keynote, and I really liked how you settled on those themes of reciprocity, community, and volunteerism. I think that's a great model and a great approach to the, what you're trying to do, because it's not just transactional, like Kathryn was saying. It's building those relationships, and it seems like that's been really successful for you. And kind of to parlay that experience and flip that last question. So if a refugee walks into a library, and what could the librarians working there, how could they best start or help support a refugee? I understand that's a really hypothetical question, but like, are there certain things you would kind of recommend starting with, or a good approach to building those connections?
I guess can I take this one? Part of our job is to be a bridge with lots of different organizations. And so when a refugee comes to us and says we're having trouble with tax help, our first response was to send them to get tax help from the local volunteers. And then often they would come back and say, that person doesn't understand me. That person, was trying to help me, but gave me a list of paperwork that I don't have. And we would, we try to take care of the people who fall through the cracks. So people who are well equipped to do things kind of can slide through, but the ones who get bounced back are the ones that we really worry about. And we spend time. I remember one time I drove around town trying to find a suitcase that was in the back of a father's car that had all the social security cards of the 11 children in it. And the parents were not getting along. And so that was his way of saying, I'm mad at you, I'm taking the paperwork. And so I remember driving a young woman around town so she could go to college, and all she needed was that one paperwork. And we found it, which was kind of amazing. But all of this is to say that when we send people to the library, they don't come back not having been helped, because librarians are welcoming, they're patient, they're kind, they know how to ask the right questions. And so I've had really excellent luck with sending people to the library at MVCC, at their colleges, and then at the Utica Public Library. They're really, really helpful. I think interpreting is important. And that's a tough one, but a lot of times, people, when they go in, they bring someone who can interpret, because they know that they're not going to be able to handle that interaction, because they don't in other places. But also library cards. I've taken lots of kids to get their library card, and they cannot believe that such a thing exists. It's the most amazing thing. And they're so excited. They think a library card is like a driver's license. And they're like, look at me and my library card. And so I would say keep up the good work.
That's great. Thank you. I think my question was so open-ended, it might be hard to answer, but probably a lot of it's a conversation about what they need and trying to get, navigating language difficulties as well. So thank you. Are there any other questions that anybody has? Otherwise, I can come up with some more things for you to talk about for a minute. Oh, we have one in the Q&A. Oh, yeah. It's more a comment about hiring librarians and volunteers with foreign language skills. Yeah, I mean, that's an essential skill. That's not discriminatory. I think that's misplaced, obviously. But Kay or Kathryn, if you have anything to add.
I'm not quite sure what the question was.
I'm not sure it was a question, it was more of a comment.
Okay.
That's awful though. I think one of the things that I think as Americans we struggle with is our poor foreign, other countries are more likely to have secondary languages or speak multiple languages, and there's a resistance in this country that I think is unfounded and really unfortunate.
One of the things that we're going to be doing over the next 3 years is adult literacy education project. And so we're in the process of finalizing a grant that will pay for some ESL teachers and some family support for family literacy. And so we really look forward to meeting with librarians and growing what we're already doing through that project. But that hasn't quite started yet.
Oh, and I also want to point out, just in regards to the comment, yeah, I think another thing I want to point out I don't think it's discriminatory to find different skills, especially different language skills. I'm finding that when people come with different language skills, they also think differently about a certain issue, because the way you think about an issue or the way you think about an issue, it changes across culture. It changes the way you think about it because of the language you speak. You think about it differently. So it's definitely a really useful skill to have more than one language.
Okay, you see that there's one more question. I have some questions about something MPCC library is exploring. Could I email you after the conference? Okay. Yeah. I'm sure if Kathryn and Kay are comfortable doing so, they can add their emails to the chat when they have a chance. I think part of a keynote is you get to see a small glimpse into all these amazing things that these folks are working on. But it's great to have it be a jumping off point to continue the conversation. And I think there's so much work to be done in this area that working together, across different organizations, as it seems you've been very heavily doing, that's important. Oh, yeah, and thank you for adding those. There's a comment from Utica Public Library.
Thanks, Brianna. We'd love to talk to you about this.
All right. If there aren't any more questions, we can. Okay, just thank you. Thank you so much, both for all the work you're doing, and I really do look forward to seeing the projects you are working on now with documenting the other side of the coin, the experiences before they come to this country. There are 2 collections. I'll add a link to the other one. There's also Portraits of Hope, which was a different project. I don't believe you were as involved with that one, Kathryn, but it's also New York Heritage, and it's more formal portraits of refugees. It's also worth checking out. Thank you so much. Again, I hope the conversation around this continues. We're going to have probably a 14-minute break since we ended a little bit early before the next session. Again, please look for fill out the evaluation form that Rebecca recently put into the chat. And if you need a certificate of attendance, that's also available. I look forward to continue the conversation after we're done here. So thank you both, and see you around.
Thank you so
you.
much. Bye.